just one qualification. I used to be the head of research at the Bank of Italy. Now, unfortunately for me, I was promoted to the board of the bank. And so I'm trying hard, you know, to keep update to the most advanced frontier of research. And I'm not sure I'm able to do it, but in any case, being a member of the board of the bank puts me in a position to see what's going on really in the world of central banks, in the world of policymakers, and you know, being an economist closed in a room, just studying on books, it's not enough. This is one lesson that I learned in my career, is that if you really want to understand an economy, the way in which it works, the way in which it should work to the benefit of the citizens, you have to, you know, at a certain point in time, you have to get out of your studying room and see and test and talk with people and talk with entrepreneurs, talk with workers, talk with associations, because that is the economy. The economy is a nexus of behaviors of all these agents. Anyway, this has nothing to do with the topic of my talk. I'm afraid that you are going to see nothing because there's too much sun, and that's good, of course, because I understand that in Moscow sun is quite rare, at least in winter, perhaps in spring. I'm trying to check whether you are able to see nothing, but there's nothing there. They're working. Anyway, the topic of my talk is a convalescent global economy. Are monetary and financial policies the right cure? Implicit in this question, there's another question, which goes this way. Should other kind of policies be there? Fiscal policies, for instance, or structural policies, in order to cure this convalescent economy, world economy. I don't want to give you an academic lecture. So please, interrupt me whenever you have a doubt, you don't understand something, or whenever you have an opinion to offer to the debate. My desire would be to have a debate with you, sort of interactive session. I don't know whether this will be possible. I noticed that you know, are sitting down just on the back of this room. But I'll be there. I'll join you there. My roadmap today will be, first, let's have a look together to the global economy. The outlook, what's going on right now, the risks for the future, short term, long term. This will be my first item in the talk. Second, what's against the possibility of a sustained recovery in the world? what are the headwinds against? Third, we know that monetary policy is very easy, very accommodative all over the world, more or less. We see that there are differences. What are the benefits of such an easy monetary stance? What are the potential risks and costs? Fourth, which is the role of macroprudential policies? Macroprudential policies is a relatively new kind of policy. They became fashionable a few years ago, in coincidence with the crisis, with the global financial crisis. And finally, I'll try to wrap up to draw some concluding thoughts on what can monetary and financial policies achieve, what they cannot achieve, which are other policy tools and measures are needed. The situation didn't change. I'm in the screen. So I move forward. First item, global economy and its outlook. Well, you know that last year the recovery had a setback, both in advanced countries and in emerging countries. Now, this year, there are early signs of stabilization in advanced countries. There's a pickup of activity in emerging countries. By the way, we continue to call them emerging countries. This is the IMF, International Monetary Fund jargon. Most of those countries that we call emerging, they have emerged. So we should find another adjective to qualify them. In any case, we'll continue, for the sake of simplicity, to call them emerging countries. Global trade has picked up a little bit in this first half of the year. Consumer and business confidence are improving in most advanced countries, but starting from very low levels that they reached 2 or 3 years ago. So we should not be complacent about this little sign of recovery in business confidence and consumer confidence. In advanced countries, an acceleration of the economic activity is expected for the second half of this year, or for the beginning of next year at the latest. Most of what I'm saying and I'm going to say is taken from the latest report from the International Monetary Fund, the latest WEO, World Economic Outlook report, which has been issued a few days ago. And according to the IMF forecasts, the world economy as a whole grew last year by a little more than 3%. It should stay there this year. It should accelerate to a 4% growth rate in 2014. This is an average, of course, covering the whole world. This average is obtained by a definitely lower figure for advanced countries, 1% or a little more last year and this year, 2%, 2.2% in 14 next year, while emerging countries were growing at a pace of more than 5%, and they will continue to grow at more than 5%, almost reaching a 6% next year. These are the IMF forecasts. Which are the risks? These are central forecasts, but around these forecasts there are risks, uncertainties, pointing up, pointing down. In such a fragile situation, downside risks are particularly important and relevant, and so we should ask ourselves what are the main downside risks. In the short term, advanced countries, in particular, are running a number of relevant risks. In the US, in the American economy, there's probably an excessive fiscal restriction. You may have followed the debate in the US regarding the fiscal cliff. Do you know what I'm talking about, the fiscal cliff? I see a couple of hands, not more than a couple of hands. You know that those strange people, American people, they have strange rules governing the budget, the public budget, and these rules were put into effect last year, and they were forcing the government to cut a number of important expenditure items in the public budget, and to cut taxes as well, so that the budget deficit was started to grow very much. And these cuts in expenditure are automatic, the so-called sequester. And the Republican Party fought very hard battle in order not to change those automatic rules. And in the end, an agreement was reached between the Obama administration and the Republican Party. So some sort of attenuation of those rules has been agreed upon. But still, at least according to the IMF, the fiscal stance in the US is too strict, excessively strict. In Europe, there's this problem of the sovereign debt crisis, and I'm going to talk about it in a moment. In the medium term, the risks to the economic outlook are, in US and in Japan, rising public debt, deteriorating public finance outlook. In the euro area, one risk comes from limited fiscal policy space because of the need to adjust budgets in most countries, in most European countries that were unbalanced. Some say that there's a sort of adjustment fatigue, austerity fatigue in the euro area. There's quite a harsh policy debate on this. Easy monetary conditions in all advanced countries imply the risk of distortions in markets, bubbles, new bubbles that may arise. In the emerging countries as well, there's a risk of asset price bubbles and overinvestment. No way. Now I'm in trouble because now, in my presentation, this should be the moment in which a beautiful graph. And I could try to show you the graph, but this is too little. Anyway, I'll try to describe to you the sense of this graph. This is a graph showing real GDP per capita around the trough, the lowest point of this recession and previous recessions in advanced economies and emerging economies. And one can see, you cannot see, but I can see from these two graphs that in advanced countries this recession was much worse than the average of the previous three in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. The red line is this recession, the blue line refers to the previous recessions. In the emerging countries, the situation is just the opposite. In emerging countries, this recession was much lighter than the other ones. So this has been a recession that hit, in particular, advanced countries. The growth engine of the advanced countries has been spoiled by this recession. What are the headwinds against a sustained recovery from this state of affairs? Let me list the factors that are behind the fact that the recovery in advanced countries is so slow. Why it is so slow? First of all, there's a public sector deleveraging. In most countries, in most advanced countries, the public sector, the public budget needs to find a new equilibrium to be restored. And so there's a deleveraging. You have to lower your indebtedness. And this means synchronized fiscal restrictions, fiscal consolidations. And this is a risk, of course, and this is, this is not good for recovery, because if everybody is doing a severe fiscal consolidation, aggregate demand in most countries, in all countries, is kept low, other things being equal. So nobody can benefit from the fact that others are recovering at the fastest pace. Public sector deleveraging. Second, private sector deleveraging, which means tight credit supply. The private sector, not in all countries, but in some countries in particular, in the US, in the UK, need to deleverage, need to abate the debt, because the debt grew excessively, and that was the main cause of we have an image.
Второй проектор тоже включите, пожалуйста.
I'm sorry, I don't understand Russian. Anyway, I go ahead. Public sector deleveraging, private sector deleveraging, euro area sovereign debt crisis, third. Fourth, global imbalances. Let's start from public sector deleveraging. As I said before, there has been a sharp and simultaneous fiscal tightening in all advanced countries, G20. Minus 2 percentage points in 2 years, 2010, 2012. And that was dragging on growth, of course, at least in the short term. I have a couple of graphs which are even more beautiful than the two preceding. One on the fiscal balance, the cyclically adjusted fiscal balance in the main. Oh, yeah, we got it. Okay, stop. This is correct. You have it. No, from there. Oh, okay. That's good. No, but I prefer the arrows to push the arrows. Well, I don't know. Try to see something here. No, because I mean the problem is that there's too much light, of course, coming from outside. Anyway, these are the cyclically adjusted fiscal balances in 4 areas: Euro area, United States, Japan, United Kingdom. Well, the colors are not very evident, but in any case, what should be perceived by these graphs is that the lines go together. So there's a simultaneity of fiscal stances. That's the point, that the impression that these graphs I want to convey. Now, if you try to adjust your public budget, and if you make a fiscal consolidation, you have an impact on GDP, a negative impact on GDP. How much? The impact on GDP depends on the size of the so-called fiscal multiplier. The fiscal multiplier is a parameter that you can estimate using econometric models, for instance. Just in order to estimate what is the impact on GDP in the short term, in the medium and long term, if you cut taxes, if you cut expenditures, or vice versa, of course. Now, this is an interesting point, because for years and years, we economists, you economists, everybody was convinced that fiscal multipliers in advanced countries were small. 0.3, 0.4, much less than 1. So that you could adjust your public budgets, limiting the damage on the real economy, on GDP. Then a new strand of literature, of economic literature, emerged a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, saying, no, the situation has dramatically changed. This big recession that we experienced on the occasion of the financial crisis has changed the structure of our economies and of our public budgets, so that now fiscal multipliers are much higher than what we were thinking before, and higher than 1. And the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, was in particular pushing this interpretation. Olivier Blanchard, he is, that you probably know, he is the chief economist at the IMF, and he's originally he's an old Keynesian. And then along the years, you know, the Keynesianism was out of date totally before the financial crisis, and so Olivier was a little bit changing his mind. But then I remember I was at the IMF last year, just 1 year ago, last spring, and I had a lunch, a working lunch with Olivier Blanchard and his staff, and I was with a couple of colleagues from the Bank of Italy, and I had been asked to give a short presentation just before lunch of the Italian situation, and then he interrupted me abruptly. And what's the fiscal multiplier that you are estimating right now? And I gasped, and I tried to recollect. And then I said, well, if I remember it correctly, it's 0.3 according to our well-tested macroeconometric model. And he said, no, you're totally wrong. Totally out of your mind. I was, you know, and that was a sort of first move that he was trying, that he made with me. I was sort of test for him, because he was changing the approach that the IMF was taking at that time, and from then on. He and the managing director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, in every public speech, in every bulletin or report they've issued since then, they have insisted, they are still insisting, that fiscal policies in advanced countries are wrong because they are too restrictive, because fiscal multipliers have changed meanwhile, and policymakers are not aware of that change, and so they are doing a damage to the economies much higher than they think, and that you know, history will get its revenge against those policymakers. Now, this is a position that deserves to be taken very seriously, of course, because IMF is a very important and serious center of economic analysis. Olivier Blanchard is one of the most famous and acclaimed economists in the world. Still, I think that they are, you know, arguing a little bit too much. This is my personal view, and this is the view of, I mean, the economists of the Bank of Italy. To say the least, one has to distinguish. They tend to make a statement which is valid everywhere in the world, in the advanced world. For Germany, for the US, for Italy, for Greece, for Spain. That's too simplistic. That's too simplistic. It might be true that the fiscal stance in the US is too restrictive. It is probably true that in Germany the fiscal stance is too restrictive and it's damaging the rest of Europe. It's not true that the fiscal stance in a country like Italy is too restrictive, because the starting point is different. I mean, we Italians started our restrictive fiscal policy at a point where the public debt in percentage of GDP had reached 120%, and we were losing access to financial markets. If a country, but this is true even for a single person, spends too much in excess of what it's earning from taxes in the case of a country, from income, from labor income in the case of a single person, and you start to make debts, and you increase your debt continuously. People, I mean creditors, your creditors are willing to lend you money, and they lend you money, and lend you money, and lend you money. And they are happy because you're a good guy, because you pay interest, and so you assure an earning, a yield to those who are lending you money. At a certain point in time, your creditors start to think, but are you able to repay this debt? And this might be a sudden thought, sudden. At that point of time, you are in trouble because they stop lending you more money. They're not still asking you to pay back your debt, but they stop lending you more money. But in the case of a country, if you have, a sort of built-in dynamics into your public budget that implies more expenditure than tax collection, and if a big portion of your public expenditure is made of payments of interest on your debt, on your past debt, then you may find it very difficult to face a sudden change in attitude in your creditors. And that's exactly what happened to Italy, what happened to Spain, what happened to a number of other countries even in past decades. Economic history is full of episodes of that kind. In such a situation, you must do a restrictive fiscal policy in order to change this built-in dynamics in your budget, to change behaviors in the political arena, in the minds of your citizens. You have to do that. Because what is the alternative? That's what the IMF and Olivier Blanchard refused to consider. What is the alternative? If you don't do that, you totally lose access to financial markets, and you are in default. And default is the main source of economic disaster, much more than a fiscal restriction. So, the result of this is that the Bank of Italy econometric model continues to estimate a 0.3 fiscal multiplier. We didn't change our mind, and we have issued, my colleagues at the research department of the bank have published a couple of papers to argue against this opinion that fiscal multipliers are now much higher than they were all over the world. But let me say one more thing regarding this point, and I'm not following my presentation anymore. I'm going to talk to you about Italy now. First of all, because I'm Italian, of course. Second, because the Italian case is a good example of, is a good case in point to let you understand what is going on in Europe. What has been going on in Europe in the last 2 years. The sovereign debt crisis. Let's talk about a little bit the sovereign debt crisis. I don't know what you have perceived from your teachers, from reading newspapers regarding the sovereign debt crisis. But I'll give you my interpretation. Everything started with Greece. Greece was the trigger. 3 years ago, Greece, which is part of the euro area, now some is asking, but how come Greece is part of the euro area? But that's another problem. And Greece was having a political crisis at that time, and there was a change in government, change in political, in the ruling coalition, and then a change in government. And the new government publicly said, look, the budget, the public budget issued and approved by the previous government was false. It was false. It was just false. Even though it had been approved by the European Statistical Institute, it was false. So that, you know, that gave rise to an immense sort of reaction, very harsh reaction in European political circles, and so Greece was on the verge of default. It needed assistance, financial assistance. Financial markets, Greece had a very high public debt, of course, so there were a lot of investors in the international financial markets that had lent money to Greece. And they started to worry, but they said, okay, but Greece is part of the euro area, so they wouldn't let Greece default. They would, the Europeans, the rest of the Europeans, they would give Greece all the financial assistance which is needed, so we are safe. We, creditors of Greece, are safe. And then a difficult political negotiation started within Europe, and the Germans started to become nervous. The German government started to say, okay, but why should we spend a lot of money in order to save these people that have falsified public documents, that have, you know, spend and spend and spend. So it was not an easy task. Putting together a package of financial assistance to Greece. At a certain point in time, in July 2011, that is a couple of years ago, an agreement was reached providing for a certain light, small involvement of the private sector in, bearing the burden of the losses, the so-called PSI, private sector involvement. And that was a turning point. That was a turning point, because financial markets started to think, so they are not saving Greece totally. They are asking us to pay, even for a small portion of the bill. At that time, financial markets, international investors started to think, but perhaps the euro, this common currency that Europeans decided to have, is it really irreversible, as they were saying, as they were telling us for years and years? Are Europeans really still willing to stay together and to share responsibilities and to share a common currency? This is the so-called redenomination risk. I don't know whether you have heard of this expression, redenomination risk. Because financial markets started to think, okay, in case, let's assume that the euro breaks up. It's a small probability, probably. 1% probability, okay. Tiny probability, but not zero. Yesterday we were thinking that the probability was zero of a euro breakup. Now we think that it's a possibility. 1% probability. In that case, what would happen? The euro breaks up. Every European country, regains its original currency, the D-mark, the French franc, the Italian lira, and then exchange rates will be formed among these reborn currencies. And what will be the exchange rate of, for example, the Italian lira against the D-mark? Well, they thought the answer is simple, because before the euro, what was the normal behavior of the Italian lira? Devaluing and devaluing. So there's a sort of historical inertia. And so they thought, in that case, low improbable it is, the Italian lira would suddenly devalue by 50%, because, meanwhile it had to time has elapsed, time has passed, 12 years of euro. So there's a tiny probability of a catastrophic event. I'm a creditor of the Italian state. I have in my mind an Italian public bond whose value is, €1. I'm running the risk, 1% probability, that it will be redenominated into new Italian lira. That's why it has been called redenomination risk. And the value of this €1 will be not 1 D-mark, it will be half a D-mark. So I will suffer a 50% loss, capital loss. I want an insurance. I want an insurance. I want an hedge. I want to hedge against this risk. And so I ask for a yield on this public bond higher than that I'm asking to the issuers of Bund, which is the German public bond. Higher, a little bit higher, 10 basis points, 12 basis points, 50 basis points. And then, at the end of 2011, November, December, this wedge, this spread, as it is technically dubbed, the spread between the yield on a 10-year Italian public bond and an analogous German public bond reached 6 percentage points, 600 basis points. That was not, to be honest, that was not only the result of the appreciation of this redenomination risk, that was also the result of an appreciation of national policies underway in Italy in those times. But the main determinants of those 6 percentage points was the redenomination risk. Actually, 3 colleagues of mine wrote a paper estimating what should have been the spread, the German-Italian spread, in absence of redenomination risk. That is, only considering the differences in national policies, in the differences between the respective virtues of Germany and Italy. And they ended up with 2.5 percentage points. 250 basis points, by and large. 200, more than 150. So 1/3 of what was evident in the markets at that time. But, I mean, Italy was not the only country to have a spread with respect to the Germans, even Spain, Greece, of course, but Spain, Portugal, Ireland, the countries in the so-called periphery of the euro area. Now, what happened after that, after 2011? It happened that the ECB, the European Central Bank, the Euro system, you know that, let me say incidentally this. We have in Europe a common currency and, of course, a common central bank. But this common central bank has been created out of all the national central banks that were in our countries before the euro. When the euro started at the end of the 90s, the founding fathers of the euro, decided to have a very decentralized kind of federal central bank. If you know the Fed, the American Fed, well, the American Fed, when it was built at the beginning of the 20th century, it was much like the euro system of today. The power, the decision power, was quite decentralized. The district banks, San Francisco, Minneapolis, Chicago, New York, of course. The representatives of the district banks in the board of the Fed at that time had much of the power. Then in the 30s, on the occasion of the Great Depression, the governance and the organization of the Fed was changed. And the Fed remained a federal central bank. They still have their district banks in a number of states. But the bulk of the power was moved to Washington. And now the Board of Governors, and in particular the President, the Chairman of the Fed, has much of the power. This is not the case in the Euro system. The European Central Bank has a board of 17 members, which are 6 sitting in Frankfurt at the ECB program. And the other are the governors of the national central banks, being part of the Euro system. And these 17 girls and guys, there are some girls, have the same decision power. So the 18, not 17, 18. So the 12 national governors, they are 12 against 6 sitting in Frankfurt. So this is a very decentralized system. Okay, that was incidental, because I said that because it's not necessarily well known the way in which the Euro system works. And let me add one thing. Time is running out. The monetary policy decisions in the Euro system are taken by this board on the basis of studies, analysis made not only by the ECB, but also by all the national central banks, and all these analyses are filtered through committees. So before a meeting of the governing board of the ECB, there's a monetary policy committee which meets with all the national representatives there, with their analytical contribution, and the would-be decision is discussed within that committee. That renders the system even more decentralized. It's not efficient, probably. It's not an efficient system. The reason why the Fed changed in the 30s was exactly because a decentralized decision-making is cumbersome. And so they were accused not to have reacted to the Great Depression promptly enough. That's why they changed. In our case, we still have that system. It might be not efficient, but it was felt necessary in order to save some pluralism within this new institution that was, unifying the currency and the monetary policy in an area which is not a state, because Europe is not a state. Europe is a bunch of national states with different parliaments, different governments, different public opinions, and different policies apart from monetary policy. So the Euro system, and this will be the last thing that I'm going to say, and then I'll give you some space for questions. Last summer, the Euro system decided to react to this redenomination risk. Because from the point of view of the central bank in charge of the euro, it was unbearable to see in the markets spreading the conviction that the euro could not be there to stay. And so the chairman of the ECB, Mario Draghi, last August, speaking in London before an audience of bankers, said those famous words that are now, mentioned and repeated every time. We'll do whatever it takes to convince people that the euro is irreversible. And I saw the video, the clip of that speech, because that was not a public speech, it was private, but then the video was put into the net, into internet. I saw the video, and it was impressive, because he said, "We'll do whatever it takes." And then he made a pause, and he was looking around, and then he had, and believe me, it will be enough. And those words had the ability to calm down markets instantly. Spreads went down. In the Italian case, the spread was last August 5 percentage points. It went down to 4. But those were words, and words needed to be followed by action, by some action, and the action followed. In September, the Eurosystem launched a financial assistance mechanism called OMT, Outright Monetary Transaction Mechanism, which provides for financial assistance to countries in difficulty, feeling pressure from the markets, in the form of purchases of government bonds of that country, unlimited. And that was the word that the market was waiting for. Unlimited. Because, a central bank has this fundamental power in its hands. The power to print an unlimited amount of money. That's the essence of the power of a central bank. So if you say the market, if you tell the market, look, if you believe that the euro is not irreversible, I don't care. I will buy as many as public bonds of the country that you're attacking in unlimited amounts, in unlimited quantities, up to, until you lose a lot of money in your financial bet, and you get convinced that I'm more powerful than you. But with conditionality. That is, a country seeking for the assistance of this OMT mechanism must accept conditions put on its national policies, on its fiscal and structural policies, by the ESM, which is the European fund which has been constituted for that purpose, the European Commission, the ECB, the IMF, even the IMF. Strict conditions with a strict monitoring. Now, no country has yet asked for the OMT assistance. The OMT is a framework which is there. It has never been used. It has never been used. But it acts as a sort of anesthetic to the markets. And so after the combination of speech by Mario Draghi and the launch of this OMT mechanism, spreads shrank very much. The spread is now in Italy 2.8%, 280 basis points, which is still more than it should be. So the so-called redenomination risk is still there a little bit. It has not been abolished at all, but it went down significantly, very, very, very significantly. Okay, I stop here. There's a mountain of things in my presentation that I could tell you, but more than 1 hour has passed. And so, right, I'm doing, okay. And so, I mean, the floor is open. Whoever wants to ask a question on what I've said, but if you have other curiosities regarding the world economy, Europe in particular, I'll give you the mic. So you
Okay. Guys, does anybody have any questions? Okay.
I think I can answer that one. Thank you very much for your attention. I have a question following from what you said in the last couple of minutes. What is the global risk of using such a mechanism as the OMT? So what is the risk of having too much euro printed for the world economy? I think it's a theoretical reason, but what would be if this mechanism was employed massively?
Yeah, I guess that you are referring to the to risks for inflation, for instance.
Yes.
Yeah.
But for some other balances, currencies,
Your question may be generalized because the OMT is a form of QE, quantitative easing, even if it's a very special form of QE. Conceived for a specific purpose, not general. But, I mean, there are many in the world thinking that every kind of quantitative easing, every kind of action by central banks, different from just moving the interest rate, but printing money in order to buy things, to purchase bonds, even private bonds. In Japan, take Japan. Japan is now planning to have a massive purchase of assets of any kind in order to fight against deflation in their case. But many think that this kind of monetary action in the end will bring inflation. To the country where the move is made, and even to other countries with spillovers. Actually, we were talking with my friend Luigi in the car before. We are observing right now a quite welcome spillover of the change in monetary policy that was it happened in Japan a few weeks ago. There's an immense flow of money going out of Japan in search for financial investment with good yields, and this is benefiting countries like Italy, where there's a risk, a little bit higher than for other countries, but yields are quite high. Anyway, to come back to your question. General answer. Right right now and in the foreseeable future, there's no risk of inflation whatsoever because the real economy is too, I mean, economic activity is too low. Aggregate demand is going down, is stagnating in the best cases. In the medium and long term, there might be a problem of inflation as a result of such big creation of liquidity. The answer given to this concern typically is, okay, but we've created that liquidity, we will be able to absorb it as fast as it will be necessary in order to prevent a burst of inflation. That's a general answer. A particular answer, because you were referring to UMT, in particular, not to QE in general. Well, I could answer this way. OMT has been conceived as a sort of big weapon not to be used. I was visiting the Kremlin the other day, and you've been there, of course, and there's an enormous gun, enormous. And the guide told us that that gun made by Peter the Great, perhaps, I don't remember, that gun was, I mean, those who built that gun knew very well that it was not able to shoot ever because it was too big and the balls were too big. But it was built anyway in order to impress people. Not the enemies, but the citizens of Moscow that should feel reassured by this enormous gun, pointed towards the enemy. OMT is much like that. Other questions?
Maybe some comments on Russian economy and its your view.
The Russian economy is one of those emerging, that I would call emerged, economies that, in spite of the big financial crisis, in spite of the recession, has hit most advanced countries, continue to go quite well. I don't see problem with the short-term outlook in Russia. As an economist, I might see some problems with the medium and long-term perspectives, because this is an economy that is not. When you are exploiting your natural resources very much, they are immense. So you could continue to do it for centuries, I don't know. But I still don't see a structural change in your productive system towards the ability of doing goods and services, high-tech, fitting the most innovative markets, the most dynamic markets. So I see a little bit of a structural problem with the Russian economy. This year, next year, you will grow by 3%, 4%. You will continue to build skyscrapers, quite impressive.
Yes, I have a question. question, but it will be more about policy and politics than about economy. You've said that European bank system is decentralized, and this is one of the problems, and it is also one of the reasons of the financial crisis. And so my question will be, why not to make the system more centralized?
System of the supervisory system.
Yes,
Well,
the control system, because you have the unique the eurozone. The control is in the eurozone is decentralized.
mm-hmm. Okay, supervision, banking supervision.
Yes,
You are talking about
yes,
banking
yes,
supervision.
I'm talking.
Okay. You may know that there's a project, which is more than a project. It's an exercise that we are already doing of unifying supervision in the euro area, because the sovereign debt crisis, the redenomination risk I was talking about before, the sovereign debt crisis has implied spillovers on the activities of our banks, because most of our banks in Europe have a lot of public bonds, government bonds in their portfolios. Typically, an Italian bank has a lot of Italian government bonds, a Spanish bank has a lot of Spanish government bonds in their portfolios. If the market value of those assets goes down, they have to mark to market, as said, and they need more capital for a given amount of loans, and it might be not easy to raise more capital, and so they tend to instead to lower lending, loans given to firms, and so the effect of this is a credit restriction, which is pro-cyclical, which goes against the need for an economic recovery. And so there was a debate, and then the result of this debate was, okay, we need a common scheme of regulation and supervision in order to have a sort of umbrella of on our European banks. From a political economy point of view, of course, there are two competing views here, because Germans and northern countries in general tend to say, okay, we might be willing to share with all the rest of Europe a responsibility for everybody's bank, but we want a say in supervising those banks, in regulating and supervising those banks. Only in that case we will be willing to, for instance, to build a common insurance deposit insurance scheme. Only in that case we will be willing to build a common resolution scheme for banks. Resolution, in the case of a bank, means closing. A failed bank must be closed, that is, resolved. And the other view, well, actually, they are not conflicting views. Everybody is convinced that if the responsibility is in common, even, you know, the possibility of supervising, regulate and supervise must be in common. And so everybody was, everybody agreed to to have, first of all, a single supervisory scheme, SSM, in place in Europe. And we are, right now, in these weeks, in these months, we are constructing this system. It's not easy at all, as you may imagine, because, you know, jurisdictions are different, juridical traditions are different, habits of praxis of supervision are different. By the way, supervision, but don't repeat what I'm going to say now. Nobody else out of this room. Supervision made by Germans was not that good in the end. It was not that better than ours, even that on the occasion of the financial crisis, the German state had to spend 2 percentage points of GDP to bail out German banks, while the Italian state spent only 0.3% of GDP to bail out Italian banks. So, I mean, that's the demonstration of the fact that our supervision, that the Italian supervision is probably better than the German. But having said that, we in the Bank of Italy were the first to say, okay, let's do this single supervisory mechanism. Let's do it. We will contribute our skills, even our people. There are tens and tens of Bank of Italy employees who are now moving to Frankfurt to be part of sort of embryo of this SSM. The problem is that, again, Germans that were the originator of this idea are now saying, okay, let's do the SSM, the single supervisory mechanism, but our Landesbanken, the regional banks, none of your business. No. They should continue to be supervised by us. This is unfair. And so others are saying, well, our cooperative banks are out of this game, and so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of lack of cooperation, but I'm confident that we'll overcome these difficulties and we'll have this SSM, but then we should have, otherwise it's all useless. The SSM serves the purpose of having a single resolution scheme and a single insurance deposit scheme. Otherwise, we were just playing fool. One and two. First you.
You spoke about the spreads of Italian 10-year government bonds and their German benchmark. That they've been reduced because of possibility of using OMT mechanism. But what about Greece spreads? They still at a very high level. So what drives them there?
Because in the case of Greece, you know, the national idiosyncratic determinant was much higher than the one coming from the general redenomination risk. That's quite a special case. I mean, Greece. Cyprus is even more special, if you want. Anyway, it came down actually, the Greek spread, a little bit, from skyrocketing levels of 2 years ago. There was another, yeah.
I heard about
Good question. She was asking about the political situation in Italy and the re-election of the President of the Republic. Actually, the old one was re-elected. Old in both sense, because he's 88, so he's really around. And the fact that the spread, the German-Italian bond spread went down by around 20 basis points just after the re-election. Yes, I mean, there's an acute crisis in the political system in Italy right now, and the President of the Republic, you know, in the Italian system, the President of the Republic has no, formally has no policy decision power. It's a sort of guarantee. But he or she has a very delicate function, because may close the parliament, may decide that the parliament is not working anymore, and so new elections are due. And he or she has the power to nominate the prime minister. So it's a system quite different from the Russian one, and even different from the American or the French one. It's more similar to the German one, because they have a president of the Republic, which is sort of ceremonial figure, much more ceremonial than in our case, by the way. Perhaps the Italian system is midway between Germany and France, some sort. In any case, so the political parties in Italy were trying to elect a new president of the Republic, because Giorgio Napolitano, the old one, his mandate expired after 7 years, and they weren't able to find a successor, because they were fighting one against the other. And then they got scared, and all together they went to the old Napolitano, saying, okay, we are not able to agree on a new name. You are the only one on which we can agree, and so please accept to be re-elected. He was thinking a little bit, because he's 88, he's tired. Even though, I mean, I saw him a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I found him terribly dynamic and mentally, definitely much more intelligent and brilliant than me. But in any case, physically, okay, he is a little bit heavy. And so markets reacted very well, because they were starting to fear sort of political stalemate and the big economic crisis following this political stalemate. And so they were relieved by the fact that at least on this very respected figure, the political parties were able to agree. And so there was this slight positive reaction, but we cannot be complacent at all, because that is an effect that will last for a few days. But then a new government must be formed, because we are without a government. We've been without a government for 3 months after the election that took place in February. We must have a new government, and that is the task that President Napolitano has right now. Finished? So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation, and unfortunately it was going differently wrong. But nevertheless, guys, you'll be able to get this presentation on the website of the Banking Institute. And unfortunately, no, because of timing, because we will have exam with other group here in 5 minutes. But otherwise, I will give the floor to Jones to respond about supervision. And I'm afraid in this case we will get a great discussion. But unfortunately, we don't have any time for that. Salvatore, once more, thank you very much. It was very